in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?
Alrighty, welcome to the show today. It's your host, Doug Crow, with the Author Your Brand Show. We are going to talk about some crazy, interesting stuff today, believe it or not. It involves failure and Excel, but those could be two separate topics. We'll see. On our show today, I've got a guy with a really cool podcast called the Failure Guy Podcast, how failure is a necessary part of success, not just happenstance or you got to, sometimes go through it. It's needed. He also runs a company that teaches people how to run Excel, which we can all use. So without further ado, our guest today, Ben Currier. Ben, how are you today?
I am unbelievable. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. So, yeah, I'm not talking to you, Alexa. Shut the heck up. Why is this even on? I'd like to find out about this topic. You named it the Failure Guy Podcast. So where did that come from?
It was a meandering kind of path towards it because so I was reading a lot of self-help books and I couldn't implement any of the actual positive things from it. I was just struggling to, I'd consume all the information, but I couldn't put it into action. But a lot of them were saying you have to get comfortable with failure in order to succeed. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do to like make that something that I don't forget about? So I checked to see if the license plate failure was available. Shocker, no one had taken it yet. So I put the failure license plate in my car. I had no plans on what I was going to do with it. I was originally going to write a book to, the point of your whole thing. But I realized that I only had a very specific realm of failure and that I didn't know enough, or at least I'd written like 3,000 words. And I was like, well, I could make this all me, but it'd be kind of cool if I did a podcast where I interviewed other people about their failures. And I think in like today's society of social media, highlight reels, and everyone's amazing and showing their best self, a lot of people don't focus on how they got there and just the massive amounts of mistakes, failures, things that didn't go right that don't get seen or shown. And I thought it was important to share people's stories. And I just had you recently on the podcast, and you were a fabulous example of sharing that and being vulnerable.
Yeah, I failed multiple times and quite dramatically. So it's funny, I when it happened, I was too embarrassed to tell a soul. I mean, I was voted most likely to succeed in high school. So for me to go through my big dip, all that crap, which you could hear about on the Failure Guy Podcast, so check it out.
Mm-hmm.
I was unable to even tell anybody about it for almost a year, and too embarrassing. And I think that's an interesting point, that it is necessary because, yeah, without that, it wouldn't be where you are. I wouldn't wish tragedy on my worst enemy, but once you have to, we can't get out of life without it, I guess, right? It's
if you're doing anything outside of your comfort zone or anything in the creativity space or anything that's pressing any bounds that haven't already been tread, you're gonna have some mess ups because you don't know what's gonna happen. And for me, I didn't even realize that I was that these failure things were happening because in corporate America, you get so my thing is mainly getting fired from every job I've had since graduating college, and you can go through life and not have to face that because in corporate America, they'll just say he worked for this amount of time and this is his thing, and so I wouldn't have to tell anybody I got fired. I never have to even like face it. And then 5 firings into it, I was like looking back going, oh man, I was fired from every one of these. Like I didn't even realize it myself. So then once I realized it, I was like, I certainly didn't want to tell people, but then I started to say, well, who cares? How am I going to get past it if I never even, look at it myself? And then also, I didn't want to go back to corporate America. So I figured if I put it out in the world, who's going to want to hire me, at least as a full-time employee?
It's not like you put the word loser in your life. Like failure is a little bit different than, being a loser. So it's like, hey,
Yeah, plus it's funny. I mean, I like people. Well, my car had also been totaled by a hailstorm, and it's a Prius, so people are judging me anyways all the time. So I figured I'd throw failure on there just to throw them for a loop and see what it was like. But what really was amazing to me is so like looking in the rearview mirror, seeing people take pictures of it, driving up next to me and staring at me. It was a lot of I got to get past caring what people think. And so after doing a year and a half of that, I'm like, I don't even notice people looking at me anymore because I don't care what they think because I've spent so much time watching them judge me that like it was like exposure therapy to not caring about what people think.
Wow. So a priest in a hailstorm with a failure license plate. Really not a thing to pick up chicks with, I guess, huh?
Uh, not a lot of things. No, definitely didn't happen that way. What I did learn is it's bad if you have a easily identifiable license plate with a bumper sticker that leads to a website with your full name. If there's road rage or any sort of scenarios where people want to find out who you are and then they can
Yeah.
immediately do that, it's not probably the best idea. So,
Was
flash
from
forward
experience?
to yeah, well, yes,
Oops.
but
Okay.
meaning I wish I was like, oh, I hope these people can't find me, but I know they can. So, more like I would suggest people who think about advertising on your license plate. It's probably not the most efficient way to do it, but I think it's just an interesting way of trying things out. One day I put the phone number for the podcast. I like duct taped a poster board to my car, and I had a microphone set up in the car. And I was driving through. I was on a giant road trip, and it was like 10 hours. I had it on my car. Nobody
Yeah.
called. Also, on the website, I said take a picture. And people were taking pictures of my car, but they weren't. It said email me the picture.
Yeah.
It was like the first thing on the site, and one person did it in a year and a half. So I'm like, it's amazing how hard it is to get people to do something. And I would have done
Yeah.
that for sure. I know if I saw someone like that, like
Yeah.
I was only marketing to me basically in that moment because I would do all these things, but no one else apparently
Well,
cared.
because you're a failure at it, I guess. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but I learned, but flash forward to last April, I
Yeah.
totaled. It was already totaled, but I wrecked the car. So I have a nice
Uh-huh.
picture of it with the failure plate, totally wrecked. But that car is no longer in my life. So I got the failure license plate in this room, but it's not currently attached to a car. But like I
Oh,
said, it's not a great idea. So I'm probably not going to put it on the next car. But I would
uh-huh.
highly recommend everybody in the country, whatever state you're in, grab the failure plate. I want to have 50 failure plates across the country.
Oh,
That's a new thing.
franchise
I
opportunity.
just
Yeah. You get one per state here, and then you
hmm
could license out the Failure Guy podcast. You could actually have co-hosts or the affiliate stations, right?
yeah, or just extra special friends who get it. Friends of failure as I call them.
All right. So I'd like to find out like the craziest failure story you've heard so far.
Oh, that I've heard so far?
Yeah.
I mean, so yours is pretty up there with losing the multi-million-dollar business and like 17 foreclosures or whatever that
19.
happened to be. 19. Yep, I knew I'd get the number wrong because it was
Yeah,
such
that's all
an
right.
excessive amount of them. Um,
Yeah.
I think uh, the biggest failure. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I think everybody's got their own things. Nothing
Yeah.
stands out to me as I want to emphasize this person really messed up. Uh, but everybody, unless they don't want to admit to it, some people really get kind of uncomfortable with the word failure. They're like, "Oh, I don't like viewing things as a failure or whatever." It's like they don't want to they want to be higher than that, like high road me on it. And I'm like, "Okay, fine. I get it. Like really failure is only giving up on something that you shouldn't have given up on. That's really true failure. Everything else is just kind of a lesson or a learning or a mistake."
I don't
But that's
know. Even giving up on something isn't a failure because you're still alive. So you could call it a pivot.
yeah,
You don't
you
have to
should
say,
give up on some things
yeah, like smoking or eating too much or whatever. It's
with the wrong
I mean,
business.
yeah, right. I've always said that both failure and success are both temporary. So
Yeah.
they're common. They're very common.
But we don't talk about it. We just hide it.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it took you a year to wanna. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it, and nobody wants to talk to you about it. No one wants to
No.
like hear like be your therapist for a half second, even if you're just talking about it.
Right.
So I wanted to have like an opener forum for that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking about the weight loss industry. The people who are successful at that post their before and after pictures, right? Okay, that's fine. You had your challenges, now you're Adonis. Great, good for you. I've seen only one person who I know personally who started with a before picture before the after picture was ready, and she posted, "Here's where I'm starting."
hmm
Like, whoa, good for you,
I
right?
want
And
to
here
see
I'm
two
gonna,
befores that never changed, or at
yep.
least uh,
Well,
uh,
it added to her commitment, saying, here's where I'm starting. I'm going to start now posting it, and then every month I'll show some progress." And I forgot what happened to it, what she did, but it was very bold of her to come out with her quote unquote failure at the get go.
yeah. I wouldn't say it's similar, but when I launched my paid Excel course, I
Yeah.
launched it before it was ready, and I gave a supreme discount because I wanted the pressure of knowing people are paying me, and if I don't make these videos,
Ah,
so like I can't motivate myself always, but if I've got people who have already bought it and are waiting on the content, so
right.
then it really made it much easier to finish because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, you guys can get like a whatever, it's like 80% off, but realize
Yeah.
it's not done and it's not even necessarily guaranteed to happen, but it helped me get past some of the just motivational things.
Yeah. So I don't know the name of this person we mentioned briefly, but I don't know TikTok either. But there's a gal there that teaches Excel, and I think she sings or something, and she's got a training program. She's doing bank. I think I read an article. She's doing like 6 figures a month selling Excel
Wow.
training on TikTok. TikTok and maybe Instagram too.
See,
But
I'm so jealous because so I started my thing in like 2010,
yeah,
and there was a point. So I've had like 5 million visitors to my site over time,
mhm,
and over 20 million minutes of my voice listened to Explain Excel. But for the first 8 years, I had no ads, no way of making money. I was just
yeah,
paying to teach people Excel because I don't like advertising. I don't like sales as that much. I don't
yeah,
want to feel like a salesman. So I wanted to make sure it was good stuff on its own merit. But then by the time I went to the paid course, like I'd lost most of the traffic and like also SEO and stuff. And I'm not, I used to make a lot more content, but the people like that who really can be consistent and stay with it,
yeah,
so impressive. And I just wish I had that mentality. Sometimes, after doing it for 12 years, I'm like, a lot of people get bored with Excel. And if anyone's listening and is bored by Excel, I get it. You open it up, it's a blank thing that looks like you could do either everything or nothing in it, and it's
yeah,
very hard to understand the value. And
yeah.
myself, sometimes it can get tough, but I got to remember there's people out there who are obsessed with it and
Mhm.
want to learn more. But frequently, I think about the people who are like, that's I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about anything else. So I got to just remotivate myself to get into that because I love what I call podcrastinating with the podcast rather than
Uh,
like doing more things. So I'm
mhm,
in a bunch of different workshops. I overcommit and over content myself in ways that sometimes can help me, sometimes don't. But since I have
yeah,
ADHD, it's tough for me to uh, always pick the right thing. And I
right.
call it, instead of attention deficit disorder, I call it attention surplus disorder. But I just can't direct it in any specific way. It's just wherever it happens to go.
And our culture makes it even more difficult nowadays, I think, with all the distractions we have online and whatnot. It was just this past year that I deleted all social media from my phone. It was so refreshing. And now I'm like, well, what do I do when I got 2 minutes of spare time? What am I doing? Like, I deleted games too because I can't do games. I can't do social media because it's a mind melting and intelligence diluting thing. So I ended up putting a book on there, read a little bit, but it's funny when you remove all that stuff, all those distractions, you're left with sometimes some empty space. Maybe meditating, Ben. I don't know.
Well, so do you know Cal Newport? He wrote the book Deep Work.
Mm-mm.
Well, that's the book people would know. He also wrote another book called Digital Minimalism, and he says to
Mhm.
get rid of all your social media apps for 30 days, and
Yeah.
then 30 days later, add each one that adds value to your life. Like really consider whether or not that thing should be in your life. And I think kind of what you did is a version of that where you needed a sabbatical from social media, and then you can kind of figure out, well, okay, which ones do I miss? Which ones do I want? And like which might actually serve me rather than having 80 things going off notifications and not knowing what to
Oh,
do.
no, I've had no notifications for years. The only thing that pings me is text messages. My phone's off. I have no notifications on my phone. I got that nailed. It was a social media that was distracting me. Now it's like, well, if I want to go on there, I'll just go on my computer when I need to go and do something for work, I can go do it. But the social part bores me to tears. I mean, see what people had for dinner last night? I don't care.
I'm glad. I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, but both of us
Yeah,
grew up with no social media. So if my most
right.
embarrassing moments were, on YouTube
Right.
forever, it would be so much more difficult to have lived during those times because I did really well in
Yeah.
school, but probably because I didn't have all those distractions.
I probably would have been arrested, I think. There's probably some things that were pretty crazy illegal. But anyway.
But it just
All
fades
right. So
from everyone's memory, which is nice. It's
that's
back
right.
then.
Yes, right. So I'm ranking in the top 5 or so of the crazy failure stories. What about on the success side? People use their failures to build themselves up. Have you had any good
Yep.
memorable stories there?
Well, so last week, the week before you, was Carol Baskin from Tiger King, and so
Yeah.
she was, so she had a pretty much success in her big cat rescue thing,
Yeah.
but then the Netflix people were telling her that this new documentary is going to be like the Blackfish thing, that that, remember that SeaWorld movie where they talked about how terrible SeaWorld was, and how they treat the killer whales. You might not have
Yeah.
seen it, but it was like a really powerful documentary
Yeah.
for the animals, and they pitched that as the way it was going to be to her, and then it
Uh-huh.
ended up being about Joe Exotic and his craziness, and then her being maybe a murderer, which to me,
Yeah.
I don't think she's a murderer, but everyone else does. Point is, for her to take that and then turn that into success. I mean, she was on Dancing with the Stars. She did all sorts of stuff, and so I, not that I would do that, but only because I would be scared to do that. But
Yeah.
it's amazing how, and getting death threats and stuff. I just couldn't. I don't know if I could handle a lot of those kind of things. She was saying she was getting death threats for decades, and so I can't take one. I've not gotten one. I don't know what's going to happen when I get my first one. So,
Oh, I can help you with that. If it ever happens, I can help you with that real easily.
so you've gotten some.
No, I haven't. No,
Okay.
I didn't think about that. But I have a friend who he was an undercover DEA officer in Australia, right? So he's facing death like within a second. Someone could whack him, right? And he quit that to start a nonprofit that rescues children from the sex trafficking trade, right? The kids.
hmm
And so he's out there busting these slavery rings, and he's getting death threats. And his like director saying, "Gosh, Glenn, are you worried about getting death threats?" He goes, "No," because but there's I saw the letter. They're threatening to kill you. He says, "Listen, if they're gonna kill me, they're gonna do it. They don't threaten you.
It's
They
a good
just do
point.
it. A
Her,
threat is only it's paper. Say,
yeah,
it doesn't mean anything."
her take on it was, if you're not getting death threats, you're not doing enough uh, in the world. And she said, stick with podcasting, and I'll probably start getting some. Who
Who said
knows?
this?
Carol, meaning
Oh, Carol. Okay,
she
well,
was saying, like, you're not doing something that's like important enough. I mean, I don't
I don't know.
necessarily
Did
agree,
Mother
because you can do
Teresa get
many
any death
important
threats?
things.
I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, who knows? I don't know who gets death threats and who doesn't. My point was, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily want more death threats, but I didn't mind the outlook of that you're doing something important, rather than I just be scared.
It's a good perspective. You gotta, if you're not pushing the envelope, you're not uh, promoting some kind of change in our
Yeah.
culture, environment, society, etc. I
You,
suppose.
your friend
Yeah.
is more of a badass too, because he was like in the like undercover zone. I'm not a
Right.
badass, so if someone's gonna try to kill me, I don't care how they threaten me. I don't know. I don't want it to be a surprise. I don't want it to be foreshadowed. I just want them to be chill with me. So I prefer, to not worry about it. But I have run into some people that, like I was saying, with the whole license plate and tracking me
Yeah.
thing. Some dicey characters that I wish I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily meet or trust or whatever. I'm too trusting,
Yeah. Well,
typically.
I'm pretty sure you're safe. You don't have a wildcat rescue. You're not doing undercover stuff. I think you'll be okay with the podcast. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
probably
well, I
not.
mean, it's a good way to look at it, and I really don't worry about
Yeah.
death. I used to think about death all the time, like every
Really.
day, and
Really.
like scared of it, not like
Uh,
wanting it or whatever. Just more like,
right.
man, we're all gonna die someday. Why isn't everyone thinking about that all the time? And then after a while, you're like, well, why am I thinking about it all the time? So
Yeah. Don't let it ruin the present, right? Unless it's
exactly,
happening
yeah,
that moment, nothing you can do about it. So.
you got to get over it. But I mean, my point
Right.
is, I want to extend this. I'm not living a life that would extend it, but I'm saying, like, I'd like it to be longer. Like, I'm not making the right
Well,
choices health wise or whatever to do that.
you're not.
But no, no, no. I mean, like, I might not be eating the right food. I might be, doing whatever. I do a lot of things that don't uh, reflect that thought process. But I would like to
Yeah.
hang around as much as I can.
Body's pretty resilient. I've seen some people recover from some major things. It's okay, unless you're doing it for, decades. But even even so, I mean, yeah, you'll bounce back. I mean,
I go to
you
the
know,
doctor and they're like, "Oh, everything's fine. Your blood pressure's fine. Everything's
yeah.
good." I'm like, "Can you just tell me to be better, please? Because I'm if you keep saying everything's fine, I'm not going to change anything. You know? And just tell me." And they're
Yeah,
like,
I gotta stop this
"What?"
coke habit.
They're like, "Everything looks good." I'm like, "Come on, just say be better." And then, but
Yeah.
if they did, I would be like, "Oh, you just said it because I told you." Point is, like, these metrics on my health can't keep up if I keep doing like I need. I have trouble with motivating myself, but there's
The
like
wine
health.
bottles are not all open back there, man. You're doing
And
okay. So,
that's true, but health on my like to-do list is pretty far down the list. I've got a lot of
uh,
things that would jump in front of it. And I think I've been to
well,
the gym like 3 times in my life. So meaning I don't do enough, and it's not in my realm of like super caring about it at the moment. So
well,
I'll get there.
for what it's
Or
worth,
won't,
yeah,
or won't.
you are younger than me, but it'll be more important as you get older. So, whatever you can do prevention wise, it's always pays off later. So,
Yep.
you know,
Meditation is something I'm trying to do a lot more of
yeah,
though. So to your point,
no,
because I think that's something that people kind of balk at or just don't.
man,
It seems stupid on the face of it sometimes to a lot of people, even myself included, because I have so much going on in my head that like to sit and try to not think or whatever, it seems counterintuitive, but it's super helpful for your brain.
yeah, with ADHD, it takes a lot of effort to zone out. I've been in over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I've had times where I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm almost every day. I take 10, 15 minutes. But this past year or so, I have not been able to really zone out clearly. I'm always thinking about it. It's
Yeah,
hard,
I need
but it's
guided
a good thing to do.
meditation because
Yeah,
if it's guided, then I'm
right.
not
Yeah, it makes it much
on
easier.
my own.
Yeah.
I
Otherwise,
can.
the monkey guides you.
Exactly, yeah, but always bring it back to the breath or
Monkey
whatever.
mind.
I don't know what version you do, but mine's more about just focusing on the breath and or focusing on some sort of specific motivational thing.
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
a calming voice walking me through it because it's less
right.
likely that I'll
Yeah.
get distracted. But the main thing is, if anyone is interested in meditation, is there's no way to mess it up. If you start thinking about stuff, it's no big deal. Just try to recognize it, let it go, and
Yeah.
go back to meditating. It's not like you
Right.
failed.
I usually just go into gratitude first, gratitude and a little bit of breathing. I've done the guided thing off and on for a while, but yeah, it depends on who it is. So, let me ask you a couple questions about Excel. You don't have to expand this if you don't have anything here, but I'm sort of curious. I asked you about the crazy failure stories and successes. So I'm in the same league of Carol Baskin. I've got a crazy bad story, but she's got a good success. What about an Excel? Have you seen anything there that really shocked you?
Oh, I've definitely had my own experiences in failing in
Yeah.
Excel, and also I've probably had more failure moments. My memory's just not that great. So I'm sure some people are like, "Oh, why don't you talk about this one?" But I don't. Off the top of my head, it isn't coming. But I do remember having to walk into the CFO's office with my tail between my legs after a giant presentation I made the week before, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Remember that $2 million we were gonna make next year?" But, that was like a mistake. It's fictional. It hasn't happened yet, but it was a math mistake. So you're gonna have to drop your expectations by like 2 million. But it was like on a much more. It wasn't like 2 million was the total amount we were making, but
Whatever. It was
it
bad.
still did not look
Wow.
good because I'd forgotten to factor depreciation into the balance sheet. Whatever. The you know Excel can get complicated. So that's really why I think I'm really good at teaching it because I've
Yeah.
in those moments and stuff, I'm like, okay, how can I make this so I'm never gonna make this mistake again? How do I
Yeah.
make like a bulletproof spreadsheet that can't have any errors and it yells at me if anything's wrong because I don't want to I don't want to have to go back in there. And even if it's, I mean, the weird thing is, if I'm making a 5-year forward-looking financial plan, which is what I
Yeah.
would do for companies, uh, I'm not a psychic, so how do I even I can say if you did this, that, and the other thing, the math says you'll get here. But you got to go into the real world and do those things. Just
Yeah.
because it's in a fancy Excel sheet doesn't mean it's going to happen. So like
Yeah.
a lot of times we'll miss targets just because people don't change the way they do
Was-
things. They're just it's in a budget, so it's going to be there. But
Investors call business plans are works of fiction anyway. I mean, it's all just
yeah,
there's so many intangible variables you have no way of knowing. It's just guessing. Excel sheet not much different, I guess. Like, hey, this is what I'm on forward looking statements, right? Obviously, on
yeah.
reporting from the past, it should be accurate, but for the
I
forward
mean, the
stuff,
math checks out. It's like if you had this
yeah,
many customers and this many, I mean, I do it so it all makes sense, but it's all
yeah,
theoretical on whether it would happen. And since
yeah,
I grew up in Salem, Massachusetts, which is a witch city, I'm very familiar with, psychics and fortune tellers and things like that. So it's like, how much do I have to pay you to lie to me? Okay, cool. And I feel like that's what corporate America is in those situations. Like, you're paying me a lot more, but I'm just literally
Yeah.
trying to predict what will happen or give you something that
Right.
is a possibility. I remember I was working for these people, and they were doing a CBD. This is when CBD was just starting out as like
Yeah.
a thing, and they had me doing this something that, like, 5 years out, they were making $2 billion, and I'm like, that's more than like the whole sunscreen industry or whatever it was at the time, combined. How are you guys as just a CBD company? Whatever. People can get crazy with the projections, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's just whatever they want it to be. A lot of jobs I've
Yeah.
been at, and they're like, here it is, and they're like, it needs to be a little bit higher, and I'm like, okay, well, why don't you just tell me the
Okay.
right answer, and I'll make it come out that way, because it's like, it's all math, you know.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Wow.
That
Interesting
was and
stuff.
that was for Viacom, one of the biggest companies in the world. So, like, so I had like a
Wow.
lies sheet. I didn't call it a lies sheet. It was like a New York plugs sheet. But it was like, this is the stuff I can't justify because I was just told to do it. I don't want to muddy it with all my real stuff. So I'll just separate it and go, I can't explain this because they just said they wanted it, but we're gonna make 2.7 million because of CRM. Oh, okay.
Okay.
How does that
Thank you,
happen?
Ben. Let me take that to the shareholders and bump up our stock price. You just made us an extra $1
Exactly.
billion valuation with your
Yeah.
spreadsheet magic.
So
Oh,
I,
that's
I
great.
I started to go more away from like huge companies and more
Yeah.
towards the small businesses because they at least understood the struggle and also were
Yeah.
more realistic. And I like having real things, like the real stuff behind the spreadsheet. Like, I used to work
Yeah.
for a video game company, the one that made Rock Band and Guitar Hero,
Oh,
back in the day. And
sure.
so when there's a physical, tangible thing happening, rather than
Cool.
just rich people trading money, it's more interesting for me. And every time I got fired, I'd switch industries so I could learn a new industry
Yeah.
and how it works. Because
I was at a party once years ago with a bunch of guys in the neighborhood. There was about 7 or 8 of us there. And this one guy looked around after about half an hour talking and says, "You know what? I just realized something." "What?" He goes, "I'm the only person here that makes something." He made like tops of ketchup bottles. Everyone else was like you said, moving money around with their trades and their funds and all
yep.
their and their consulting. They weren't making anything, I'm like,
hmm
this guy made the tops of ketchup bottles that he did pretty well with it. There's a lot of
It's cool. Well, especially when it's something that helps someone. I mean, video games debatably help people, but I got to go to China and see like the first
oh,
Paul
cool.
McCartney bases come off the line. They were blue
Wow.
plastic because they were just using
Yeah,
whatever mold stuff they were using.
right.
But like
Yeah.
Yoko Ono came to our office and Danny Harrison and stuff. It was crazy to work there.
Yeah,
I was there for
very
like 5 years,
cool.
and then they got sold to a private equity company, so Viacom didn't own them. Then I got a boss who I hated, and then I physically repelled from the work. I usually should have quit, but I don't give up. So then they eventually fire me. It's kind of how it goes.
Different kind of failure. Speaking of that, if you want to preview a person to be on your show, how do they get a hold of you?
So there's many different ways. There's a failureguide.com website, which will certainly lead them towards my email address. You can email me, ben@pod.fail, 10 letters, ben@pod.fail. You can find me on Instagram at failureguyben. A lot of times I don't know where people should find me. LinkedIn is probably where I have the biggest presence, but I don't have a beard in the headshot, and I only knew I could grow a beard about a year ago. So I'm really, really upset with the amount of time I spent without one. And yeah, just reach out to me in any way. I'm all over the place. If you go to failureguide.com, I'm sure you can find me. Excelexposure.com is what I should have said, because that's the thing that makes you money, but I don't typically direct people there. But if you use the code failure for my premium course, you get 20% off.
Okay, so I'll run that by slower. Make sure it'll be in the show notes here too. But it's excelexposure.com is your business,
Yep,
and failureguide.com is the podcast.
correct.
All right, very good. Ben, it's great having you on today. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And when I do get to around to writing a book, I'm going to reach out to you.
All right, I look forward to talking about it. I love the topic of catching all these fails out there. And that finishes up our show today, the Author Brand Show. That was Ben Currier from excelexposure.com or the failureguy.com. Check them out, and of course, subscribe by clicking below here, and you get some free goodies from others as well. Thanks so much. This is Doug Crow, your host of the Author Brand Show.